Hi, my name is Anabel Brenner. My mom is Mexican and my dad is German, so I'm trilingual, but I was born and raised for part of my childhood in Schopfheim, Germany. I moved to the United States when I was 7 years old, so I've lived here for 13 years now, and I am now located in Atlanta, Georgia. So we moved to America because of my dad's job. They gave him an opportunity as a consultant to come to the United States for 3 years, which actually ended up turning into a permanent stay. We got our green cards, I think we started off on visas and then got our green card, but it is a very vague thing in my memory just because I was so young. I do remember taking the picture for my green card. But overall, I was fairly excited for the process. I was really excited to be going somewhere new, experience a new place, and I was getting hamstered for moving here, so. So I didn't really have any expectations moving here just because I was so young. I think I was kind of expecting it to be very similar to what my home was like, and I lived in a pretty small town, very rural. It was kind of like very far south Germany, like border of France and Switzerland, so I think I was expecting it to be a lot more rural than it was. So the main difference was just the houses and the spacing. So I grew up in such a small town, the houses were pretty spaced out. From my backyard, you could see rolling hills with houses on them, you could see farms. It was a lot of green land and forest, and then my grandparents lived right by the Black Forest, so I also grew up there. My kindergarten was literally, it's called Wald Kindergarten, which is literally forest kindergarten. Like, my preschool was in the forest for, like, most of it. So it was very different coming to an area where there were a lot more houses, a lot more close together, and not as much forest, but a lot more like city, a lot more, I guess it was a little bit more developed than where I was, and it was just very, very different. Like, I used to be able to walk to school by myself, cross the street by myself when I was like 4, and then when I got here, I wasn't allowed to like go anywhere by myself until I reached like 10 years old. So that was really different. Okay, this is gonna sound so bad. Um, so I grew up, since it was such a small town, and it was a lot of people whose kids lived there, and then their kids lived there, so it was a lot of the same. So actually, when we had moved here, we had to get certain vaccines, and my nurse was African American, and I actually had never seen that before. I had never seen anyone that was Indian or African American, so it was like not any, like, I didn't really have a bad reaction, but to me it was just kind of like, huh, interesting. Like, it was just very different to me, and that was something that at the time I had never seen before, and so that was new. The main thing that stood out to me when I was 7 was, I guess, the manner difference at that age, where it was a big deal to, like, no elbows on the table, always chew with your mouth closed. So when I got to school and saw, all these kids at lunch, like, chewing with their mouth open, I was really in shock, I guess. I went home and told my mom, I was like, Mom, I told someone they need to chew with their mouth closed, and they gave me a weird look. And it was just very different. Language-wise, I didn't speak any English when I moved here, except my best friend from Germany taught me the word cat, but she told me it meant dog, and no one corrected me for like a week when we moved here, so I thought cat meant dog. I caught on to it pretty quickly, though, since I was so young, and I was kind of put into school almost immediately after moving here. It was pretty easy with friends just because since I was younger, there were a lot of like hand gestures and things, but there were some kids that when my language did develop a little bit that did make a little fun of my accent, but it was never too bad. And I don't know, I thought that was pretty easy and nice, like everyone was very understanding. Culture-wise, I think the main thing I noticed when I was younger was just Christmas. I was so used to always having a real Christmas tree, having that smell, and then when we came here, we got a fake tree. And I got really sad because the real trees were just, I was so used to them, and my parents thought that the real tree wouldn't really thrive in this since it's so much warmer here. That was really different. It was sad. I can't really answer that well just because I was so young, and I just kind of did the first grade there for like a semester, and I understand the differences in schooling from the United States and Germany, but I never really experienced it, so I can't really tell the difference in quality, so I can't really fully answer that one. Biggest culture shock, I think, was the difference in food. I was not used to the amount of grease that can come from some fast food places here. So the first time I had a hot dog here was at a fair, and I threw up that night. And then I didn't eat another hot dog until I was like 13. So that was definitely an adjustment, and that's something that I'm still a little bit picky about, just food. My stomach still doesn't really love certain amounts of grease. So one thing with American culture is that people here are very, very friendly. Like if they see someone new, they'll go up and introduce themselves. See a new neighbor, you'll say hi. But in Germany, while they are still friendly, they are a little bit more reserved into themselves. So you usually have to go up and introduce yourself versus them coming to you. So when I came here, that was something that was also very different, was everybody wanted to come meet the new kid, and that was really nice and not something I expected. And that is something that I've gained from here and lost from there, is just I've become a lot more, I guess you can say outgoing. Like we got some new neighbors back home, and we went, made them some brownies, and like introduced ourselves, just said hi, and just, I guess, very friendly here. I think the only restriction I really face that I've noticed is more just because I have a green card and I'm not a citizen, and that's that I can't vote, which kind of sucks because even though I'm not a citizen, I have still lived here for 13 years, and I'm 20 years old, so normally I could vote if I was a U.S. citizen, but I can't. I've faced both good and bad. Um, it really depends on the people you're with. Like, I've with some friends or at the school, usually people find out and they get so like intrigued. They're like, "Whoa, you speak 3 languages, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, can I see your green card? That's so interesting. I've never really seen one." And then there's some people that definitely have different opinions on immigrants and are willing to express that, and that's a time where you just kind of have to put up a tough front, and you just kind of learn to deal with that. Like when we learned about World War II in middle school, and that's something I've actually heard, I still hear very, like, here and there, it's just like Nazi references in middle school. There were some kids that would just keep calling me a Nazi because I was German. I don't think some people really understand what that means and how horrible it is to call a person that. And my mom, being Mexican, actually in our neighborhood, there was a woman that came up to her once and was just like, "Oh, you're Mexican, right?" And she goes, "Yes." And she goes, "I really need my lawn cut, but I want to do it for cheap, so you must have some friends, like some illegal friends somewhere that are willing to do it, right?" And my mom just looks at her and then looks at me and she goes, "Excuse me, but all of my friends are legal, thank you," and then walked away. So I think some people can be certain ways, but you just kind of need to put up a tough front and deal with it, I guess. So another experience I had was someone expressing their opinion, and honestly a place where I didn't find it very appropriate to express was actually in high school and in the classroom. One of my teachers decided to express her opinion on how she doesn't think immigrants really belong here, how they're taking jobs that belong to Americans, that they should be paid significantly less because they are taking jobs that belong to Americans. That I like just things around that area, and I was just kind of sitting there just thinking like, hi, immigrant here, what's up? I'm uncomfortable, this is not appropriate. And that was just really awkward, and I just felt so out of place, especially since like at the same time we were learning about how America's this huge melting pot, like partially built off immigration. So I was just kind of sitting there so like startled at this comment, just feeling so out of place and awkward. So we try to go back to both Germany and Mexico at least once a year, since that's where the rest of our family is. I have grandparents and cousins in both Germany and Mexico. So we stay in touch with the culture that way. And also I'm actually still like Instagram and Facebook friends, and still have like, well, not still, I've gotten some of the phone numbers since we've gotten older of some of my childhood friends from where I actually grew up in Schopfheim. And it's really fun to kind of see like the ways we've all grown from when we were so young. Since I have lived a decent amount in different parts of my life in each country, I would say I consider them both my home a little bit in different ways. Germany has a lot of memories of my young childhood, and still, since we go back so often, it just still has memories that continue on. While I live in the United States now, I've lived here for 13 years. I plan on continuing to live here, so this is also my home to me. So I actually plan on applying for my dual citizenship, and I've actually started the process for that recently. Just because I do consider both countries my home, I don't want to be just a U.S. citizen, but for both. And I do plan on staying in the United States as of right now.